Honda is quite a conservative manufacturer when it comes to launching all new models or all new nameplates. But I'm driving one today, the new ZR-V, or ZR-V if you're from the US. As not much of a fan of crossovers myself, I didn't have high expectations of this model. The phrase tall Civic kept creeping into my mind. But if that's what you're looking for, then the ZR-V is brilliant. It's one of the best crossovers I've driven in years, especially when it comes to its driving dynamics and how it makes you feel behind the wheel. Even though it's a hybrid that doesn't have any gears, but it simulates gears beautifully. It shares its mechanicals with the Civic, which I drove around this very road and I absolutely enjoyed it. It was remarkably sporty for a hybrid because, as you know, the Civic is only available in Europe as a hybrid, as is the ZR-V, which is supposed to slot in between the HR-V and the CR-V. Its powertrain, the only one available here, is an upgraded version of the one you find in the Civic, so it uses a powerful electric motor to drive the wheels and a 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder gas engine as a generator. The electric motor makes 184 horsepower and 315 Newton meters of torque, and it sends this car to 100 kilometers per hour in 7.9 seconds. It doesn't feel that quick. The Civic feels quicker because it's about 200 kilos lighter than this, and it feels a bit sharper through the corners. Honda explains that this car doesn't have a traditional transmission. The electric motor drives the front wheels through a reduction gear, through a simple reduction gear mechanism, and the gas engine powers the front wheels when you're cruising at above 70 kilometers per hour. And when you are using the engine and not the motor to drive the vehicle, you can see it in the power flow screen as a little cog that appears in the center of the animation. Even at high speed, if you floor the gas, the little cog goes away and you're using the electric motor to power the vehicle. I will say that it doesn't feel especially quick, but it's a bit of an event accelerating in this vehicle, especially since it's a hybrid that doesn't have gears, because you actually hear it shifting, air quotes. So when you're just driving normally, the vehicle is very quiet, and you do hear the gas engine occasionally wake up since it needs to generate electricity to refill the 1.05 kilowatt hour battery pack. Second, third. I'm not even entirely sure that's the engine. It probably isn't. That's just noise being pumped in through the speakers to simulate a sporty VTEC engine revving away under the hood. The Atkinson unit in this vehicle doesn't sound that engaging. You have 4 driving modes to select between. Econ, which is supposed to help you achieve this car's claimed efficiency of under 6 liters per 100 kilometers in mixed conditions. I've been averaging around 7.2, and I've not been driving it especially economically, as I do. So I think that's pretty good. Some people have even gotten it to around 5-ish liters while driving it in town, which I think is pretty remarkable. I think 5.8 was the lowest that I've heard somebody achieve, with mostly urban driving. Then there's the normal mode, which is normal. And then you put it into sport, which frankly, I don't think it really does anything. Maybe it tightens up and makes the steering feel a bit heavier, but I can't really tell much of a difference. It doesn't feel like it accelerates any quicker. That's why I've mostly kept it in normal mode. Maybe sport delivers a bit more noise? So that was sport, and this is normal? No, it's exactly the same. The 4th mode is something I've not seen in a Honda. It's snow mode. I'm not sure why you would need it. I guess it adjusts the traction control to allow you to rock the car back and forth if you're stuck in snow, or it limits the power delivery so that you don't spin the wheels and end up stuck in the first place. And you will probably get stuck with this car because it doesn't have all-wheel drive, since it's based on the Civic's underpinnings. And while it's nowhere near as bad at putting its power down as the ENY1 that I tested a couple of weeks back, that just squandered all of its power away, especially when you set off. You do get a bit of that in the ZR-V, but it's a front-wheel drive vehicle that is trying to deliver 315 Newton meters through the front wheels, while the front wheels also have to steer. So yeah, there's only so much you can do with front-wheel drive. There's no all-wheel drive option for this vehicle, although you can buy it as a non-hybrid in other markets with Honda's 1.5 liter turbocharged VTEC engine. which makes similar power to this, a bit less torque, and its performance numbers are similar, although on paper it's about 2 liters per 100 kilometers thirstier than this. In terms of the way it drives, this is what surprised me the most. And this is what made me say that this is one of the best, or the best crossover that I've driven in years. That's based on how it can string a few corners together. It's really good. The driving position is nice and low. You can bring the steering wheel really close to you. And this is the first step to giving you confidence to push this car into corners. Even though it's quite tall and it has about 19 centimeters of ground clearance, which is pretty good for a crossover with front-wheel drive that nobody is ever going to take off-road. But you don't really lose a lot through the corners. The steering is precise. Honda says it paid great attention to making the steering in this vehicle feel responsive and even providing some feedback to the driver. And honestly, it's not bad. I guess this is as good a time as any to do a launch. Let's put it in sport. I don't know why. I don't think it's any faster, as I've said. Left foot on the brake, load it up. So now it's not simulating gears. I guess you can hear what that's like. I'm not sure why. I didn't disable any of the settings. Boy, this picks up speed quite well. Now it's simulating gears again. I didn't touch any of the settings. So I wonder if you don't load it up and you just stab it off the line, will it simulate gears? Because you kind of want it to simulate gears. So it does. And I like that they've taken the gear simulation up a notch, where the electric motor that, as I've said, is the main source of traction for this car, it cuts a little bit of torque when it supposedly shifts. It's subtle, but you feel it, and it feels more like a regular non-hybrid car, a sporty one at that. And the sound that is being pumped into the cabin, I think it's coming from the front speakers, so that it gives you the impression that it's the engine, whereas in some other sporty cars that I've driven, the fake sound comes from the rear speakers to simulate a loud exhaust. But Honda isn't about that. In the Honda, you want to hear the induction noise, you want to hear the VTEC, and this tricks you into believing that that's what's happening under the hood, even though it's just an Atkinson cycle engine under there, which is designed to run at constant RPMs and deliver really good fuel economy. That's why it's the engine of choice for hybrids. The car also has paddles behind the steering wheel, which are really, really nice. Believe it or not, they are metal, and they are plastic in some much more expensive cars, BMW, Mercedes. However, you can't really do much with them. All you can do is just increase or decrease the level of brake regeneration, which isn't especially impressive. I'm not sure what is limiting the level of available regen in Honda's electric and electrified models, because it's less than what rivals provide in their equivalent models. So now I'm doing 73 kilometers per hour. I have set regen to its maximum setting, and I'm going to lift off. It is slowing down. But it then keeps on creeping forward at, let's see how fast. Looks like it's 8 kilometers per hour. And then you have to apply the friction brakes to stop it. Let's simulate some gears. Woo! This car's gear simulation is so good that it makes me wonder if we really are living in a simulation. If Honda, a car manufacturer, can trick you into thinking that this car has physical cogs that it is swapping, even though nothing of the sort is actually happening, who knows what's possible, right? In terms of its design, Honda is clearly trying to position this vehicle as a more premium offering. From the back, I think it looks a bit like a Mercedes GLC, the previous generation one, or a Porsche Macan. It's a bit fastback-ish, and this does have an effect on its level of cargo room, which is smaller than in the Civic, by the way, even though this is a bigger car. It's 380 liters or 370 if you get the advanced model like my Tester, which gets a subwoofer in the trunk that eats up 10 liters. You can thankfully fold down the rear seats quite easily, and you get over 1,300 liters of space, which is pretty good. And with them folded down, you get an almost flat loading bay, so you can push stuff all the way to the backs of the front seats. Another corner here. Maybe this car could have used some adaptive dampers so that you could stiffen them up. While it is precise and sure-footed, it does lean a little bit. And maybe some bigger wheels, because you can only get it with 18s that have quite chunky tires, which help with comfort, but they don't help make it feel especially sporty. But maybe that's something you can change after you buy the vehicle. From the side, the ZR-V still looks a bit like a Macan in my book, which means it's a bit sporty. But even though the roofline does tend to slope down towards the rear, I actually fit behind myself. I am 183 centimeters tall, or 6 foot tall, and I have plenty of headroom, knee room, and all sorts of room. Even in my advanced Tester with the panoramic sunroof that does eat into headroom a little bit. Anybody taller than me might struggle to sit upright in the rear though. The front end design is quite unusual. It looks nothing like any other Honda in the range. I think it's pretty clear that Honda wants to set this model apart, but if you read the brochures and go to any Honda website, it doesn't sound like it's trying to portray this vehicle as being something special. But its front-end design and its exterior design, generally speaking, I think really do. I think the headlights look a bit like those on the Mondeo. The grille, I think, looks a bit Mercedes-esque. I'm also getting some Maserati Grecale hints when I look at the front end, and there's a poshness about it. Some people don't like it, but I absolutely love the way this car looks. And it even has a couple of active aero elements in the bumper, the two slats. They feed air into the wheel well, which, like in any other car that has this, it is meant to help make this car a bit slipperier. I'm a fan of all modern Honda interiors, and while before driving this vehicle I thought the one in the Civic was my favorite, now I think I prefer the one in the ZR-V. Especially since you don't feel like you're sitting in an SUV, which is a big plus for me. Even though the seats are fairly high, they are set fairly high, I mean, but you can drop the driving position to sporty levels, and so I like that. Sport and advanced trim level models get electric seats, and the advanced also gets a memory function for the driver. I like that you can change the angle of the cushion for the driver's seat so that it supports your thighs. For those of us with longer legs, this is really important, especially since it prevents your legs becoming strained on a long journey. At least that's what happens in my case. The seats themselves are really good. They are very comfy. I always praise Honda seats for being comfortable. Even the ones in the Civic Type R, which are really sporty, but they are also very comfy on a long journey. And the ones in the ZR-V, especially in the Advance, which feature a full leather finish and some ribbing here, I guess you would call it, this helps them look really sporty, even though they don't really have that much lateral support. They do hold you in place reasonably well, but I would have liked a bit more lateral support. I do like the steering wheel though, and even though the paddles don't really do much, they do help it look really sporty. I also think the steering wheel is just the right size, and even though it's not one of those thick steering wheels that some manufacturers put in their vehicles, this one's perfectly fine, and it helps the cabin feel sporty. I also like the raised center console where you find the buttons for the transmission. It is clad in a leather-like material that might look black at first glance, which, by the way, is a bit of a criticism for the interior itself. There are no flourishes of color anywhere. It's just a bit black. But if you pay close attention to this material, which you also find on the doors here and on the dash here, there's a hint of gold glitter on it. I initially thought somebody had spilled their nail polish on it or something and had tried wiping it off and didn't do a good job, but then I saw it was on all surfaces covered with this material throughout the cabin. So this is a design choice. Never have I ever seen anything like this. So I really like this raised center console. I just want to touch it. It's reasonably soft, although there's not much give in the memory foam underneath the fake leather, but you do get some sporty stitches here, and below this raised console, you get a place to store your phone. My iPhone 11 Pro Max fits under there just fine. And the surface is also rubberized so your phone doesn't slide around. And there's a USB-A data connection here, which you need for Android Auto, which isn't wireless, unlike Apple CarPlay, which is. The armrest is really nicely integrated into the raised console, and it's quite comfy, although I would have liked a bit more padding, because you can hit the bottom of the padding if you lean on it a little bit with your elbow. I know I keep droning on about this center console, but as much as I like the design of it, then the materials and how it looks in the context of the interior, which I think looks even sportier because of it, I would have liked it to be a bit more solid, because you can quite easily move it. And when I hit it with my knee by accident while driving, I don't like the fact that I can see it moving, and it unsettles the two cup holders here. I'm so happy that Honda doesn't force you to use the touchscreen to adjust the climate. Even though in the ENY1, you can check out my review of that on the channel, it does, because that has a big 15.1-inch screen here in the center, which Honda might equip some of its models with when the time comes to facelift them. The design of the dashboard is reminiscent of that in the Civic, complete with this honeycomb thing that runs all the way from the center console to in front of the passenger, and I think it looks really good, but it does have a bit of a more SUV-like design, and it seems a bit taller and more raised, I guess I would call it, and I really like it. Whenever I open the door in the ZR-V, I just can't help but look at the seats, this console, I know the console, the door cards, everything just looks so sexy. I think I prefer it to the interior in the slightly more expensive and bigger CR-V. I also like the fact that Honda doesn't discriminate the rear passengers, who get the same quality materials on the door cards as front passengers. And in my advanced tester, they also get heated seats. The outer seats in the back are heated, as are the ones in the front, of course, and the steering wheel. Such a useful feature on those cold mornings. In advanced trim, the ZR-V also comes with a 5-inch head-up display, which is projected onto the windscreen. The driver gets a 10-inch digital gauge cluster in the advanced trim, or a part digital setup in lower grades. The infotainment deserves a word as well. It's much better than older Honda systems. There's nothing to criticize about it, to be honest. It just works. If you want to charge your devices, you can do it in the ZR-V. There's a wireless charger for your phone underneath the climate controls, where you will also find a traditional 12-volt connection. There's a USB-C on the passenger side, which is only used for charging. It's not a data connection, so your Android phone needs to have a USB-C to USB-A cable. And there's a pair of USB-Cs for charging in the back as well. Rear passengers don't get any climate controls, but they do get vents, so at least they can direct the air whose temperature you set here in the front. So for the current drive, when I started recording this review about 48 minutes ago, it will be shorter for you, don't worry. It was 7.3, now it's 6.9, so the manufacturer's claim should be achievable. When I was driving it on the highway at 130 kilometers per hour, it was using 7.88 liters per 100 kilometers, so maybe it's not as efficient at high speed as some other vehicles. I would also like to note that even though this is a reasonably sporty looking crossover, so it's not a square vehicle of the type that is most easy to see out of, with big glazed areas and all of that, but visibility in the ZR-V is surprisingly good. You can not only see the sky if you get an advanced car, but you can also see all around you very well. And the side mirrors are also really big, and they leave you in no doubt as to what is behind you. What might leave you in some doubt regarding what's behind the vehicle is the backup camera. Here in Romania, at least, you cannot get this vehicle with a 360-degree view system. It only comes with a really crappy backup camera with a very poor resolution, and it also gets very dirty very easily, so you regularly have to wipe it down. And I know Honda can do better, because I've seen its surround view camera system in the ENY1, where not only the backup camera is better than this, but even the top-down perspective that you get by blending together the feed from the front camera, rear camera, and mirror-mounted cameras But that's really good also, and it actually helps you maneuver. But as I've said, this car's visibility is good, so it's a minor niggle. It has front and rear parking sensors, so you're unlikely to hit anything in it. Easy boy. The 12-speaker Bose sound system is the final highlight that I would like to point out after my ZR-V driving experience. It is brilliant. There's no distortion even if you crank it all the way up, at least if you have a high quality audio feed. I really enjoyed it. Oh, and another highlight is the panoramic roof, which opens. The front part does open. And I was surprised to find that you can drive this car at speed, even 100 kilometers per hour, with it open, and the little wind deflector that pops up really does its job very well. And even rear passengers never complained about it. One thing the rear passengers did complain about, when I had 3 of them in the back, was that shoulder room was a bit tight. I think I've covered everything I wanted to say about the ZR-V. A really nice surprise, a great looking crossover that doesn't really feel like a crossover to drive. It just feels like a tall, sorted hatchback. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like it and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.